On the docket for today's show, a lot to get to on the Ben Simmons trade front. Also, Joel Embiid continues to play his way into the NBA MVP conversation. But first, we're a little less than a month away from the NBA trade deadline, so sound off, Philly. If you want the Sixers to trade Ben Simmons prior to February 10th, hit that thumbs up icon, like the video, and let's start today's show. You're watching Philadelphia 76ers Now by Chat Sports. I'm your host, Chase Senior. We start off today's show with taking a look at what Joel Embiid has been able to do over the last month and change. He got off to that rocky start to begin the 2021-2022 campaign, but really, since he came back off the COVID list, he's been a completely different player. And last year, he finished second in NBA MVP voting behind the Joker. I think over the last month and change, he's actually been better than he was last year, which is really saying something. Let's first take a look at his numbers over the last 10 games. Stupid digits, almost 33 points per game during the 7-game winning streak, which is included in that 10-game span, 10 rebounds per night. He's also been great defensively with a block and a half. He's shooting almost 54% from the floor and 41.5% from distance. Last 19 games, he's been very good as well, averaging almost 30 points, 11 rebounds, a block and a half, almost 50% from the deck, and 38% from the floor. Joel Embiid is really garnering MVP buzz, and when you have these types of conversations as to who the most valuable player should be, I always kind of coin it in this sense. What would that team be like, and how would they be performing without that individual player? Sixers are already playing without one of the best defensive players in the league in Ben Simmons, and if you take Embiid away from the equation, they'd be one of the worst teams in the NBA. Instead, right now, they're one of the hottest on the backs of Embiid right now. Sam Amick of The Athletic kind of paying praise to Embiid with the way that he's been balling out over the last several weeks, saying this: during the Sixers' 7-game winning streak that has them just one game behind the defending champion Bucks, big man Joel Embiid is playing his way back into the MVP race of late, and thus reminding everyone that it's a damn shame that a season of his prime is being unofficially wasted here. He's a player who is worthy of title contention, but the Simmons standoff, at least for now, has put a virtual ceiling on what this team can do for now in terms of winning it all. Now, Sam Amick, I'm not sure if you've been watching Philadelphia 76ers Now by Chat Sports with the Philly guy here in Chase Senior, but I've been saying this for weeks. When I was growing up, I got to see Allen Iverson playing at that MVP level, and the front office failed to surround him with the necessary pieces to truly chase a championship outside of that magical 2001 season. They cannot afford to do the same thing with Joel Embiid. We're not sure because of his injury history, because of his size, because of the fact that he's as big as he is, for how long he's going to be playing at this truly special level. So even if Daryl Morey can't get a top 10 player back for Ben Simmons, can you get Joel Embiid, at least a co-star who's a 1B, maybe even a borderline all-star, to at least help him this year and give this team hope and give the fan base hope that you can chase another Larry O.B. And this is why the Ben Simmons situation right now is so brutal for this basketball team. Ben Simmons' shortcomings and his unwillingness to really improve his offensive game, I believe, cost the Sixers in the second round against the Boston Celtics a couple years ago, back in 2019 against the Toronto Raptors, and it reared its ugly head yet again last year in that second round series against the Atlanta Hawks. So it's the play of Ben Simmons that has cost the Sixers deep playoff runs alongside Joel Embiid, but now it's the stubbornness of Ben Simmons that is also costing not just the organization, but Joel Embiid and some of his prime years as well. Before we get into these Ben Simmons trade rumors, as we just kind of quickly alluded to that coming up, will Joel Embiid win NBA MVP? I think the Sixers are going to have to continue to climb up the Eastern Conference standings, but if he plays like he has been, and if he's able to stay healthy, I think there's a shot. Type W for win, type L for lose. Be sure to get your votes in the comment section down below. Now, before we get to all the latest news and rumors surrounding Ben Simmons and this franchise, if a Sixers trade happens at any point leading up to the NBA trade deadline, We have you locked and loaded right here on Philadelphia 76ers Now by Chat Sports. Let's get to 4,000 subscribers by the NBA trade deadline. I think it's possible because the views on the videos that we've been pushing out, absolutely stupid. So if you want really multiple videos every single week, hit that red subscribe button down below to stay in the know with the 76ers. All right, Ben Simmons Saga. So we're going to hit this on multiple fronts, and there's a lot to get to, certainly. According to Adrian Wojnarowski of ESPN, he went on to report on Tuesday that the Ben Simmons Saga could last up until the NBA draft. And considering what I said and what Sam Amick said, I think that would be an awful, awful mistake for Daryl Morey if he didn't pull the trigger on a Simmons trade. More reporting from Wojnarowski on Ben Simmons saying this, quote, "There is no movement, and we may be in this situation all the way until the NBA draft. Right now, you look at Philadelphia and the kinds of players available to them in a Ben Simmons trade. A Harrison Barnes, Domantas Sabonis, John Collins in Atlanta. Hypothetically, if they took any of those guys on in big deals and still have Tobias Harris on your roster at the same position, making closer to $40 million a year over the following 2 seasons. And so unless they could expand a deal, make it bigger, really he's basically saying that a trade is not going to come to fruition. Now, from the Sixers' point of view, I certainly see where they're coming from. I talk about getting a borderline all-star. I don't know if Harrison Barnes is that. John Collins is that. And a couple of other players who we'll talk about later on today's show are about at that level. But from Daryl Morey's point of view, those guys don't really move the needle this year. And while a lot of people think that Ben Simmons' trade value is damaged, I actually tend to believe it's higher than what people think. But those guys don't really move the needle, so I see where the Sixers are coming from. I also think that this is kind of agent-driven as well. It's Rich Paul potentially in Adrian Wojnarowski's ear trying to give him that information to push the Sixers to potentially make a deal of some significance. So with that, let me ask you this. With the Ben Simmons saga continuing, with how he ended this year last year against the Atlanta Hawks in the playoffs and some of his shortcomings on the offensive end of the floor, what do you think his trade value is right now? A, B, C, D, or F? Here on Philadelphia 76ers Now by Chat Sports, we're all about audience engagement. We love to see the comment section popping off. Another opportunity for you to be a part of the show just as much as I am, so be sure to get those votes in down in the comment section right now. Wonderful deal we want to tell you about thanks to our friends at Fanatics. We know that Mitchell & Ness is a legendary Philadelphia brand, and we know they have some really fresh swag, including this Sixers tank top, which will have you looking fine and dandy for the ladies or another significant other down at the Jersey Shore this summer. Chatsports.com/Sixers tank. It's currently on sale. Was $80, now $56. Limited time only. Get your hands on this fresh 76ers tank top by using that link down below. Thanks to Michael Rubin and our friends at Fanatics. I'll put that link in the comments section as well as the description of this video. Continuing on the Ben Simmons trade front, you kind of look at both sides here, where Daryl Morey is coming from, but also the other side, where I'm kind of coming from and where the fan base is coming from. So from Daryl Morey's perspective, he wants an all-star back for a 3-time all-star. Totally understandable. He also looks at Ben Simmons as one of the best defensive players in the league. I actually think he is the best because of his positional versatility and his ability to guard all 5 positions. He also thinks that Ben Simmons has tremendous value because he's still young, in his prime at 25 years old. There's not really an injury history, and he's under contract for the next few seasons. The other side of this argument, though, is that Ben Simmons' trade value is diminished, and I and the fan base would like to see Daryl Morey trade away Simmons to get Embiid a co-star to compete for a championship right now to take advantage of Embiid being at the peak of his powers. Simmons also has his offensive shortcomings. He is neglected to shoot the basketball. His mental fortitude can be questioned, and honestly, on that end of the floor, he's really shaky shooting the basketball, offensively outside of really the dunker spot, and he's an awful free throw shooter as well. And there are also questions as to who Ben Simmons is offensively. He's got marvelous vision. He can really run the floor in a spectacular way, especially in transition, and he creates other opportunities for his teammates. But opposing defenses sag off of him because they're not buying that he's going to chuck up any shots, and when he does, it's a baby hook or an ugly-looking J, and he has $108 million left on his deal. So for a team inquiring about his services, they have questions as to who they are getting back as far as the player in Ben Simmons. As for the teams interested in him, we talked about this on Tuesday. This list, according to Shams Charania, the Atlanta Hawks, Sacramento Kings, Portland Trail Blazers, Minnesota Timberwolves, and Indiana Pacers, among others, according to Shams. Now, for the Hawks, you have a couple of players, like a John Collins and a Cam Reddish. Sacramento Kings, a De'Aaron Fox, a Tyrese Haliburton. Portland Trail Blazers, honestly, it's becoming more and more realistic that Damian Lillard could sit out the rest of the year because of that problematic abdominal injury. Minnesota Timberwolves have been hot. They're not trading away Karl Anthony Towns or Anthony Edwards, and I don't want D'Angelo Russell back because he's James Harden light. And the Indiana Pacers, a couple of players, a Chris Duarte maybe, a Malcolm Brogdon, maybe even a Karis LeVert, a Domantas Sabonis. A couple players on that roster might appeal me just a little bit, but does that move the needle for what has been a stubborn Daryl Morey? Now, Sam Amick in that article on The Athletic did talk specifically about a couple of Ben Simmons trade targets. We've talked about John Collins here on the show, a high-flying four-man who can also play a little five. De'Aaron Fox is a very good point guard, but honestly, I like the future outlook of Tyrese Maxey over De'Aaron Fox, but Fox still that borderline echelon all-star that I'm talking about. Tyrese Haliburton, I honestly might bet on his upside over De'Aaron Fox. I really like what he brings you defensively. Not the same offensive player as De'Aaron Fox, but maybe you can get both of those guys back for Ben Simmons. Maybe you can even include and swap one of those players out for Buddy Hield, who gives you a very good three-point shooting threat from beyond the arc. We're going to continue to break all of this down leading up to the NBA trade deadline. But before we get out of here, speaking of the deadline, will Simmons get dealt prior to it? Type T for trade, type K for keep. Make sure you subscribe to the channel to stay in the know with everything going down with the Philadelphia 76ers. And thanks for watching today's show.